So Psalm 82, verse 1, God, which is Elohim in Hebrew, has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. So Psalm 82 talks about them committing injustice of various kinds, and then God saying, you will die like humans.
That's what I think keeps them within orthodoxy. Now, I know other people right now are going, okay, wait a minute. I think if you ask Heiser, give me one text that lays out the divine counsel, he'd point towards this.
You know that I've been reacting to a lot of Dr. Michael Heiser's videos, and today we're going to be looking at other people talk about their perspective on Dr. Michael Heiser and maybe a little bit different viewpoints that have different rebuttals. So I'm excited about this. Shout out to Sean McDowell. He has an Old Testament professor, Charlie Trim, to discuss the book. So let's get into it.
The core idea is God has this divine council, and there's some good guys and some bad guys, and that influences large parts of the biblical story.
That's really helpful. In one of the updated pieces of the book, somebody asked him, well, why do you have a divine council? Do you need it? And does God need it? And his answer is like, no, God doesn't need a divine council. God doesn't need us, but he chooses for reasons of his own.
Amen.
Now, just so people are listening, we're gonna walk through some of the details of this, but the divine council would include beings like angels and demons, but even many other beings beyond that, correct?
It gets a bit technical because he would most likely differentiate the divine council from other spirit beings. So just because you're a spirit being doesn't necessarily mean you're in a divine council. And so there's different, say, rebellions of different bad guys against God, and there's different roles and so on. And so he's nervous, for example, about using angels, the word angel, to describe the spirit beings, because that's a functional term, and not all the spirit beings might necessarily be messengers, which what the word angel means. And so it's not quite that simple, but it's beginning to describe it at a broad level.
We're getting there. That actually, when I first read his book on demons, that was game-changing for me, because I think of angels as certain particular beings. And
I grew up thinking angels were just all spirit beings. They're all the same. But obviously I knew, and then after going to college, I knew like a little bit more. Angels meant messengers. Not all angels are the same. Not all angels have wings. Most of them don't.
he talks about the angel of the Lord is a messenger. That is the, pre-incarnate Christ, who's a messenger. Doesn't mean he was an actual angel in the way, say, Jehovah's Witnesses might argue, or we depict angels. So you're right, it's a little more complex than that. All right, so there's a lot of passages. He makes his case all across the Old Testament through the New Testament. We won't look at all of them. I tried to pull out kind of about 5 passages that kind of best explained where he's coming from and why. And one of the first ones you read a moment ago, he actually said, quote, Heiser said, when he read this, it hit him like a bolt of lightning, which is an awesome metaphor. So maybe read the passage again or explain what is it in this passage and how does he use it to advance the idea of the divine council?
So Psalm 82, verse 1, once again, God, which is Elohim in Hebrew, has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. And that's the contrast, because clearly the second part can't be Yahweh. That can't be the supreme God. So then who is going on here? What's happening?
For all the people who say, no, there's no other spiritual beings, what do you have to say about that verse then? It's not people. It's not, some people like to say, oh, it's God's appointed people like humans. But no, it says in the midst of gods, it's both Elohim for each one, but it's not the one true God. So what's going on? And I'm in the midst of, I just started reading The Unseen Realm. He just found this one day when a friend told him to read Psalms 82 in Hebrew.
So one of the traditional readings of this is that these are human judges, and Heiser is quick to discount that. I think rightly. I think these are spirit beings of some kind. And so what we see here is this image of divine council. God is ruling over it. And then in the rest of the chapter, we have God judging members of the divine council, which is interesting of itself too. Yeah. So like, what are they doing wrong and so on? So Psalm 82 talks about them committing injustice of various kinds, and then God saying, you will die like humans. And so God is judging these other members of the divine council. And then to explain that, he appeals to several other texts, which we'll get to in a moment. But this is one of the clearest places of these spirit beings surrounding God, and then especially them being called Elohim. And so Elohim, Heiser argues, and I think he's correct in this, it's a broad term. It doesn't mean the one supreme deity. It basically means a member of the spirit realm. And so, for example, when the deceased Samuel rises from the ground, he's called an Elohim. So we're not equating Samuel with Yahweh, but we're saying, oh.
Now, I did not know that. So anyone who is considered a spirit being, well, I knew that from Dr. Michael Heiser, is considered an Elohim. They use that. But I did not know they use that for Samuel.
Someone from the spirit realm that's rising. And so the Elohim here, and in Hebrew, I think, in general, has a broader meaning than just the one supreme deity. It's one who is a member of the spirit realm.
Wow.
That was eye-opening for me as well. I always thought Elohim was a name like Yahweh is a name distinctly for the God of Israel. But he makes some other careful distinctions where he'll say, you know, there are other Elohims, but there's no other Elohim like Yahweh. That's a distinction that he makes. Even if we don't agree with him on the divine counsel, that's what I think keeps him within orthodoxy. Now, I know other people right now are going, okay, wait a minute. Is this polytheism? Is this orthodox? Dr. Charlie Trim, what do you think? I would say, hold on. We're trying to understand his worldview first, and then we'll get your take, which, by the way, I haven't even heard yet. I'm really interested in hearing it. So Psalm 82:1 is helpful. This was a passage that I picked that jumped out to me. I don't know if it's the most central, but I thought it was fascinating. And there's this story in 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 16 through 23. Verse 19 jumped out to me. And then when I was reading his book, I'm like, how did I miss this? Where it says, I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne with all the hosts of heaven, standing beside him from his right hand and from his left hand. What is going on in 1 Kings 22, at least in terms of how Heiser understands it?
Yeah, so I would say this is a clear example of the divine counsel. And so in this case,
when you really think about it, it's not just angels now. It's not just angels surrounding him. There's some more spirit persons, spiritual beings all around. And if you got to take the Bible serious, or you believe that the Bible is completely true, you have to take these verses serious. You can't just push it off.
we don't have the word Elohim. We have the host of heaven. Host is a military term, so we get this image of military forces surrounding him. So maybe it's not exactly the Psalm 82, or we're not sure, but it seems to be the same kind of picture where we have God with those spirit beings around him. And what we have in Kings is we see them in action. Like the various members of the Divine Council offer ideas, and then one offers an idea that Yahweh decides to go with. And so we see them working together with Yahweh to create a plan for what to do in this particular situation. And it's all in favor or in service of this broader story. It's not designed to tell you about the divine council or anything like that. It's just kind of a passing remark, a passing part of the story about something else. And so this, I think, gives us a pretty good hint, a glimpse of what the divine council looks like in action.
One of the things I appreciate about Heiser is he talks a lot about saying, let's understand the Bible on its own terms, given its language, given its culture of the time. That's, I think, another reason why he's popular, is he really emphasizes that. And Bible-believing Christians and even Jews and beyond are like, yes, what does the text say? Okay.
But yeah, I wanted to point out before, I still think he still falls under the line of orthodoxy. He's not like a Mormon who thinks that like anyone can become God. God was created. No, that's not what he believes. He's just looking into the text and realizing that there's other spiritual Elohims, and they just use that word for Elohim, you know?
Our first passage was from Psalm 82, wisdom literature, and then 1 Kings, which is probably more of a historical book. And then we go to Genesis chapter 1, and we don't have to talk about settle the question of genre, but clearly something else besides just a straightforward historical narrative additionally is taking place in the first chapter of the book. I'm not saying it's not history. Don't call me a heretic. Not my point. But there's endless debate about those first 11 chapters. So I'm trying to show the next one will be Deuteronomy, that there's a range of passages now, the law, that he pulls from the divine counsel. If this was all in Psalms, I might say, okay, this is all metaphorical, it's music, but he draws from more other passages. So Genesis 1, God says, let us make mankind in our image.
I always thought that was the Trinity. Everyone always points that to the Trinity. But Michael Heiser says, yeah, I don't think God needs to talk to himself, or like there's no need because they know everything together. But could God not have a conversation like with the Trinity? I mean, there's still three separate essences,
126. There's a lot of debate about this. How does Heiser understand that famous passage?
So the traditional Christian understanding of this must be Trinity, because how else can God say, let us? And so from New Testament perspective, God is Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So clearly it must be that.
Yep.
Old Testament scholars for years have been a little bit nervous about doing that because the Trinity is not as clear in the Old Testament. And so Heiser is part of that. So for him, he says the us is not Trinity, it's divine counsel. Who's with God in the Old Testament? Well, it's the host of heaven. It's the Elohim. It's these what we would call angel spirit beings. And so what Heiser sees in this creation account is God saying to the divine council, let us together make them. Now, Heiser's quick to say, in the following verse, when it says, and God created, that is a singular verb. So we don't have multiple creators here. It's not like God is working with the angels directly to create humans. It's almost in a sense, the angels are his sounding board, or almost like his audience, where he says, like, let's do this great thing. And then Yahweh's the one who does it. Like that is very clear in the following verse, that Yahweh is the one who created, singular verb. And so the divine council plays a role, and you can fill in the gaps imaginatively. Did they have some ideas? Like, was the platypus the idea of this angel over here or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe they had some advisory role. Maybe they just said, Yahweh, that is amazing. Do it.
That's probably what it would be if that is the case. I just don't think God would need any help. He doesn't need anything, but he does that for a relationship. I would say out of his outpouring love in Trinity.
It is, they were there with Yahweh when he created, but Yahweh singularly, he is the one who did the creation.
So I remember reading or listening to a commentary on Genesis by Dennis Prager, who's Jewish. And it's the first time I heard somebody take this passage, and he said, let us, like he's announcing to the angels. That's what the us is. Now, when I read Heiser, I was like, oh, you could take that not just the angels, but the divine council, whatever those other spirit beings are. Seems to me, I don't want to jump too far ahead to critique, but if the divine council can be established elsewhere, this seems to be consistent with it. Just like I would say, if God is Trinitarian, this is consistent with it, but I don't know that you can draw the Trinity out of this because it doesn't say three. It doesn't define it in the way we would want to. This is where some of the debate and discussion is going, we'll come back to. But two more passages, and this next one is perhaps the most important because
Are they saying that these spiritual beings are still like in God's image, just like us, or no?
Describes his views sometimes as a Deuteronomy 32 worldview. So Psalm 82 got his attention, but Deuteronomy 32 spells this out. This is like, I think if you ask Heiser, give me one text that lays out the divine counsel, he'd point towards this. So what is going on there, and how does it make his case?
Deuteronomy 32, and this is where we have to get technical in order to explain it.
Fair enough.
Apologize in advance for some Greek and Hebrew.
Some people are excited. They're not apologizing. They're like,
Yes!
let's go.
So Deuteronomy
We're
32,
excited.
verse 8. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Now, if you read that in the NIV, there's one major difference at the end. So in my ESV
That's
here,
crazy.
it says the number of the sons of God. The NIV says the number of the sons of Israel.
That's a big difference. Why is it like that?
Which is considerably different. So the difference here is the Masoretic text, which is the standard received text for the Old Testament in Hebrew, the one that we usually go with when we read Old Testament, that's the one that says number of the sons of Israel. However, the Greek translation and one of the Dead Sea Scrolls agree against the Masoretic text. So Greek translation, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they say the sons of God.
Wow.
And so
I am always going to be tilting towards the older text, the older manuscripts. That's why when people say, I only read the King James Version. Well, it was translated from the Masoretic text, and it's a lot newer. So it's just the only thing I have to say about that.
given the external evidence, the Greek translation, Dead Sea Scroll, as well as that power of explanation, I could see a Hebrew scribe getting a bit nervous about sons of God. So just like some people in modern days are a bit nervous about connecting God with spirit beings and so on, I could see a Hebrew scribe saying, let's change this to sons of Israel instead. And so that's my guess about how things have shifted over the years.
Okay,
So-
can I pause for a second before we go any further? There's also debate about, say, the height of Goliath. And the Masoretic text has an equivalent of 9 feet tall. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint are closer to like 6'9". So this
Yep.
isn't the only case in which there's some textual questions at play, not just interpretive exegesis questions. But then we have to ask, what's the most reasonable?
Maybe for that, they'd had different measuring systems, and they would have known, hey, actually 6'9" means 9 feet tall. I don't know.
What you're saying is typically there's a move from more controversial to less. You wouldn't intentionally interpret something in a way that would bring on controversy for the most part, as far as we can guess. That's helpful. Now keep going with what this means and how you take it.
Let me have a side note, too, for those of you getting nervous about changing Bibles. So I'm writing a commentary on Exodus, and part of what I've done is I've read every single scrap of Exodus in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's a variety of other readings and so on. It's less than 10 places, I think, where the Masoretic text I have changed to something that's in a Dead Sea Scroll. So it's very minimal. This is not a common thing. It's not like every verse the Dead Sea Scroll has changed something.
That's good.
So this is not very common. So just to calm people.
We
who
need
are-
to do
who
a
are worried
show
about
on that, but I digress. Let's come back to that. That's really helpful.
Yeah, and it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't ever change like the gospel or Jesus dying on the cross for your sins.
So in this case, Deuteronomy 32:8, what we have is then the division of the world according to the number of the sons of God. So I think what's going on is the peoples of the world are being divided into various groups, and then each group gets its patron son of God. So think guardian angel, but at a corporate level. So this group over here, you get this spirit being, this group over here, you get this spirit being, and so on. And so God is dividing up the nations, and each nation would then get a patron deity, if you want to say Elohim, or spirit being, or something along those lines. Now, what's a little bit less clear is this judgment? Is it blessing? Like, did God give the patron deity as a gift to the nations? And the goal was, okay, patron deity, your job is to help these people serve Yahweh better. Or is it judgment? You guys messed up. I'm going to give you this terrible spirit being, and your life is going to be miserable.
Wow.
And so putting this verse together with Psalm 82, what you could say is maybe it was a good spirit being at the beginning, and then he went rogue, and then Psalm 82 is God judging that spirit being, or a variety of them, for basically following what is the traditional Satan narrative. Instead of helping people follow God better, they are wanting people to serve me instead, and so becoming idolatrous. That's
Wow, that's very possible. And that makes you always wonder about free will, spirits, beings, angels, whoever. They have a free will as well. They have to choose whether or not they want to follow God or be their own God or allow pride to seep in.
unclear. But at least what's clear is we have these spirit beings connected to various groups of humans, which then could explain the origin of, say, foreign deities in the Old Testament, like Baal and Chemosh. So Chemosh is the god of Moab. Maybe it's not just a figment of their imagination. Maybe this is an actual spirit being who was appointed by God over Moab. And once again, did he start out good and go bad? Was it judgment? That part's not as clear.
Okay, so this
That's
is where it
crazy.
gets really controversial and interesting to me. And so maybe just explain to make sure our viewers are tracking with this. I think most Christians traditionally would say Baal does not exist. Murdoch, whoever these gods are, don't exist. They're like idols. They're false gods. They're not real. On Heiser's worldview, at least some of them do gods, lowercase g, these sons of gods described in Psalm 82 and Deuteronomy 32 that were set to be in charge of maybe protecting on some fashion these people groups fell. So they actually exist as lowercase gods. They're real, not just idols.
Correct.
Okay, that is super interesting. Now,
I always thought that when you read the Bible, it was taken as those are just literal, fake, nothing to do, anything going on gods. Like, they're just metal pieces of wood. That's it. And I think what Michael Heiser's saying is, yeah, those are things that are metal, but they built those statues for whatever god they wanted to worship.
To get ahead of ourselves because we could start just talking about this and unpacking it. Our goal so far, and there's one more passage I want you to explain because I think it relates to this, is Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And this is a passage, oh my goodness, if there's any passage that there's more debate and confusion and is weird in the Bible, Genesis has to be on the top 5 list, maybe number 1. I have no idea. So what's going on in this passage? What's Heiser's take on it? And how does it fit within his larger worldview?
So to step back for a moment, Heiser sees 3 major rebellions in the first few chapters of Genesis. So Genesis 3, the snake episode, that's the first rebellion, kind of traditional Christian theology there. And then Heiser connects what we were just talking about, Deuteronomy 32, with the Tower of Babel. So then as the people go out from the Tower of Babel, then you get this division of the peoples among all the various spirit beings. So that's the third one. So one is Genesis 3, third one is Tower of Babel, Deuteronomy 32, and spirit beings, patron deities, and so on. The second one is Genesis 6, and this is where it starts getting weird. So let me read Genesis 6 for us to start out. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then Yahweh said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And then the story just moves on. So many questions.
Agreed. Okay, so Heiser has this unique take on this passage. As far as I can tell, it's unique. Maybe some others have.
Well, it's not quite unique.
Okay.
So he's actually going with a significant stream of reception history as far as what this passage is talking about. So there's been a variety of interpretations over the years that read these sons of God as human in some way. So maybe it's kings who are abusing their authority, or maybe it's the line of Seth intermarrying with the line of Cain, and they're not supposed to be doing that, or something like that. But a significant line of interpretation has been, when it says sons of God, you read what sons of God means elsewhere in the Old Testament, which is spirit beings.
Yep.
And so if you just read the text, that seems like it's a pretty straightforward argument. You have spirit beings coming down and having children with human women. And the main problem with that is just, it's really weird. Like, you have spirit beings having kids with human women.
Right.
Like, what? But that
Agreed.
has been an important interpretive viewpoint through the years.
And it can't be just normal kings or whatever, because that's how they produce the Nephilim, the giants. The kings are not producing these giants or Nephilim or whatever. So I thought this was super fascinating. I would love to know what you guys think about this. You can go watch the entire video. It will be in the link in the description. I don't want to go any further on this, but also fascinating. And definitely Michael Heiser has done a great service to help so many people at least see from his perspective whether or not you think it's true or not. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't, please subscribe.